Welcome back to the Chief Podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Leach, Jacob here, and we are talking about books we read in 2022. As you may know, Jake and I are avid readers, so we've got some to cover for you, the good, the bad, the ugly. And, let's get into it. Also, Achieve merch. Unfortunately, you guys will not be able to purchase right now, but we had a generous donation from one of our biggest fans, and they went ahead and made us these. So one day, these will be going wholesale, of course. Gym merch, motivational stuff. But for right now, we're just rocking it because that's the privilege we have.
If we put our podcast on the blockchain, we would know who listens first, and they would have early access to merch. That'd be crazy.
Absolutely. Please leave a comment if you want some merch. Maybe you'll get gifted. Anyway,
let's
roll.
No offense, I think I was slightly more books than you, so maybe we'll go back and forth. I'll start first.
Sounds good.
I wrote them in order. I didn't know if you ranked yours in any order. I have both of our lists here. So first book I read this year was How to Talk to Anyone. I don't even remember the author, and to be honest, it wasn't that good. If you're someone that struggles with something like that, it might be a good thing. I'd say a lot of it is like, oh, that's a cool psychological fact, but it's something I already did. Like mirroring, for example, where someone's telling a story and you're talking about all this, or maybe I just said what I just said and you're like, mirroring? Like you just say the last word I said,
right,
and it makes me keep talking.
Right.
Something like that. And that was pretty much that.
What's my number one?
Your first book, or is this in order? Or what?
Yeah, it's chronological.
Okay, Hacksaw Ridge.
Yeah, Hacksaw Ridge is a good one. I don't really know why I read that, to be honest.
I don't even know what it is.
It is a book about... I'm going to butcher this. He's a really Christian guy. He's a conscientious objector in World War II, and he's basically fighting against the Japanese. Movie made about it. He doesn't want to carry weapons or hold guns or anything, and that causes a whole bunch of problems while he's in the army. Or Marine Corps.
How'd you feel about it? Did you like it?
I mean, it was really good. Okay. It's a super religious book. I mean, the story's just incredible. That's why it was made into a movie. I feel like the movie was slightly less good than the book, but literally the same script. Every word of the book was basically in the movie. Takeaways, it's just about him being an incredible person. He's a medical guy, and he saves, 30 people.
Cool. He's medic.
Yeah, he also saves, wounded Japanese guys. I mean, he's just literally like Jesus himself.
Yeah.
It's a great book. I mean, it was a good read. I think I was playing Minecraft the whole time, so I just sped through it in 3 days. But, yeah.
Nice. Next I had read Relentless. Don't remember the author. But it was the guy that was Michael Jordan's personal trainer, Dwayne Wade's personal trainer. I actually audiobooked this one, so it was really good while I was at the gym. And it was just about how to drive yourself to be better and how to get yourself into that mindset. Turning it on, turning it off, and knowing what you want towards your goals. And this was like a paradigm shift for me. I can't even lie. And it's crazy because, I'd read self-help books before and things like that. But this puts you into the mind of people that have done it before, and you're like, listen, if there are people that know what it takes to be successful, it's going to come from the people that are successful.
That's true. That is very true.
And I just really liked it. Especially because it wasn't very long, and you're able to just catch a glimpse of greatness, and then realize it's something you want to go for.
That's good. What did he do in his professional life besides training? Did he have some crazy story or anything, or
I don't think so.
How did he get to that?
It wasn't about him is the thing, so I don't really know. I probably should have researched that a little bit more. It was just a lot about Michael Jordan and Dwayne Wade, and about his rules for success and how to be relentless and things. And then he would tell a story about this is a time where we really showcased this. And yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Sweet.
The next you read, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari.
Yeah, paradigm shift book. This guy, I don't remember whether it's a true story or not. I think it's realistic fiction. Basically, super successful business. I think he's a lawyer. Mm-hmm. Super successful lawyer, partner at a company, making $500,000, and then basically throws everything away, goes to Nepal or Bhutan, and starts living with a bunch of monks, and basically the whole story is just him telling his friend everything he did through a conversation. It's like a conversation book in like one night. They talk through everything. Really good, kind of like stoicism, how to be happy book. I thought it was really good. I think the key takeaway was probably just the like material items weren't going to get you everywhere you wanted. And then he realized like he was spending so much time at work. He was neglecting his family and all the other health related items. Like he was about to die of cancer, I think is why he like quit and did it, and he got healed from that. So there was like, basically the moral was there's 5 pillars of health, not just success in your job. So
I think I remember you telling me about that one.
Yeah, I would recommend. I mean, it's an easy read. Quick book. Number 3,
I read James Madison, A Life Reconsidered.
5th president?
4th. James Monroe was 5th. Yeah, I believe.
Yeah, you're right.
I say I believe because I didn't get that far into the book. No, I read like 95% of it, and then kind of like skimmed the very end conclusion, which didn't go into his presidency very much. The book was boring, but it was pretty good. It was sort of before I was in history phase, which I'm going into now. I like reading history, but that's why I was bored with this one a little bit, but I was home and I didn't have many of my books that I have here, so I was like, let me read one of my dad's books.
Yeah.
If you're into history, read it. James Madison did some very, very special things. And if you don't know about it, you should definitely read it. But there's not too much to say unless you want to go into history lessons. So
yeah, I actually really want to start reading biographies.
Yeah, really good. Biographies, histories. I've been much more into those recently.
Yeah, on that topic, The Monk Who Steals Ferrari was straight off the parents' book.
Okay.
Shelf.
I thought
did
you
not
were going to
pick
talk
that one
about
up.
Your third, because we were talking about histories.
What's third?
The Gulag
Archipelago.
Yes.
Wow, what a fucking book, dude. Yeah. That's probably one of the craziest books I've ever read, and it's all true. Basically recounts the story of the Russian social revolution with Stalin. And like, if you read 1984 and you were like, this is crazy, how could they do this to people? It's like that on steroids. Like, it really happened. These things actually occurred. And like the treatment that basically the Russian Communist Party had against their people was absurd. Like the fear-mongering, the accusations, the trial system, everything was so corrupt. Like, you really have to read that.
Killing like hundreds of millions of their own people.
Yeah, literally 50 million people just died through communism, starvation, working to death, public execution.
Yeah.
I mean, literally anything you can imagine happened. It's so bad. There's a chapter in there, I think, that's just called like forms of interrogation, and it walks through like the 17 top forms of interrogation, which were just like the worst possible things you can imagine. Like we're talking like male on female situations, and basically if you didn't consent to anything, you were against the party, or you're against the social system. I mean, it was crazy. And basically you just had to admit guilt, and then you went to serve your sentence of life working, building this industrial system, which is how Russia became a, economic power, was because they used their people as slaves. Crazy book. You have to read it. Yeah. It's horrible.
And I was in the car a few times with you driving places, and we would listen to it, and that it is super, super dark, but it is a crazy history, and it's something that everybody should know about, at least, if you're not going to read the whole thing. And the story's written by someone that lived in some of the concentration camps that they had at the time, and either escaped or made it out by the time
it got out.
Yeah, but crazy story, and pretty much all of it's
true. And I'm pretty sure I only read the first part, and there's 2 more parts.
It was like the actual book, but like the next volume or something.
It just insane. Like you hear about Hitler and all of that kind of stuff going on in World War II, especially because we were involved. This is something that was like almost, I don't know,
in our time,
10 times the amount of people died. It's speaking of like Jewish people versus Russian people, and like we have no idea it happened, unless you read it. Not to compare tragedy, you can't really compare tragedies to one another, but like if you had asked me, in which case more people died, I would have been like, more Jewish people were killed in that time period than ever, and I was wrong. So You really have got to read that.
Yeah.
What do you got next?
I'm gonna go through the next 3,
Okay.
so I might talk for a bit because I think I have a few more than you.
Sure.
But I read The 48 Laws of Power. I audiobooked. I read Never Split the Difference, and I read Barbarians at the Gate. I put down like the books that really made a big impact on my life, and all 3 of those were on there. Along with Relentless and like 1 or 2 others I'll mention later. But The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene is exactly what it says. The 48 Laws of Power in any human-to-human relationship, with actual historical excerpts. I feel like especially when a lot of people talk about a power law and they're like, here's an example, Tommy Shelby and Peaky Blinders. It's like, no, like, give me a historical account of this, and he'll go back and be like, back in the 1750s when this person did this in France to gain power, like, because it's hard to do that now because you don't know everything that's going on behind the scenes in politics, so you have to go back far to see what these people actually did, and he does a very, very good job of that with super, super good detailed laws, and why they work. And I remember you said that, like, why aren't there 3 laws of power? But, like, he makes it 48, and they're very good. And I enjoyed it. Never Split the Difference is a book on negotiations. I had to read this for a class, and I didn't think I was going to like it very much. I actually requested a different book, but they said, no, read this one. And I really, really enjoyed it. Because I liked this negotiations class I was in, and this book taught me more than that class. And don't judge it by the title. It's not a good title. It's not even about never splitting the difference.
Yeah.
That's like a subset of one of the rules. But he does a very good job about explaining how to win in negotiations, and sort of different anchors and tactics you can use. But I won't really go into them now. Read it. It's not super long. And then Barbarians at the Gate is a first-hand account of sort of the mergers and acquisitions world back in the 1980s, about RJR Nabisco, and sort of the takeover that happened to form that, what happened after, cigarette companies, snack companies. It was crazy. Most of it actually in our area, in the Carolinas, which is pretty cool. And it made me really interested in that field. M&A is one of the things I want to go into if I stick with going into tax for a little while. And that was really, really good. I didn't understand what really transpired back in the 80s and why that was such a crazy time. And along with trading and mortgage-backed securities, this was crazy as well. So
Yeah, I did not make it all the way through.
Okay, I was wondering that because you definitely you read some of it.
Yeah, I listened to probably 12 hours of it, so I got a pretty good chunk of it, and I just could not. It was really just a time where I wasn't listening to audiobooks enough, and I wasn't into it, so I just kind of swapped it out and got something a little more gripping. But
yeah, absolutely,
good book. I mean, it is a detailed account for sure.
You read The Zen of Martial Arts next.
Yeah, that one.
That sounds good.
It was good. I mean,
you're allowed to say it wasn't.
It's tough because there's so many books like it, and I know it's probably not that book's fault, but I've read so many books similar to it that I think I discounted it a little bit. But basically, it compares martial arts to real life in like a very technical way, which is really cool, especially if you're a martial artist. It's just kind of like understanding if you know how to do a move versus actually like performing the move. So it kind of takes you through like famous martial artists and how they would envision punching through a plank or something, and then it'll walk you through how you could apply that to your life and just not thinking like, I'm just going to hit this plank, I'm going to punch through it. So it's like there's a whole mindset, getting your body physically aligned with your thoughts, which was pretty
sort
cool.
of just like being in a flow state while fighting.
Not really. That would simplify it a little too much, probably, because he broke down like a lot of individual movements and then compared them to how you should align your mind, body, and soul. So it was a lot deeper than just martial arts. The Zens, I think, are a series. So there's the Zen and Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is another book, and I think there's a ton more. Okay. So I think you could pick any particular field that would combine the comparison between that field and real life. So I think this one was just about martial arts, which I thought was cool because I want to do martial arts one day, but
Nice.
you could probably find one that's a little more aligned with what you're doing.
Good.
Hopefully there's a Zen of running somewhere, or I'll have to write it.
Next, I read The $1 Billion Loser, or just $1 Billion Loser. Forget who it was by, Michael something, about Adam Newman, the rise and fall of WeWork. There's a show or movie about that now called We Crashed, I believe, and a ton of articles. It got pretty big after this book was written, and Adam Newman is actually founding a new real estate company now that just got a huge investment, and everybody's like, this guy's a fraudster, like, why is he getting money? But after reading that book, I mean, it's crazy because the author tried to paint him as a fraudster. He created this company, WeWork. They got valued way higher than they should have been, eventually crashed. They paid him $1 billion to leave, and they IPO'd. They still exist. If you see, I've been to Atlanta a few times, and I see WeWork buildings. But they're definitely not as valuable as they once were. But it seemed like he actually wanted to create value. It's just that he was so good at propping it up that people believed him a little bit too much, and they got too much money. It's really how it seemed to me, but it's a pretty good first-hand account of that. If you want to read more about entrepreneurship in general, I would definitely recommend it. Sure. You read Blink.
Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell. That's a classic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of all his books. That one in particular kind of combines your initial reaction to something and what you perceive versus your like cognitive thinking and intuition, which we talked about a lot on one of the previous podcasts, just kind of making big decisions with your head and making small decisions, or making big decisions with your heart and small decisions with your head, trusting your instincts, your intuition, you know if something's bad is about to happen, because you get those feelings, and that there's a reason for that. That's why we evolved. Mm-hmm. So super good book. He basically, all his books are just like a case study of several psychological studies, or all of that. So everything he does is just so fact based that you just can't disagree with it.
Yeah. I next read Man's Search for Meaning. This was really short. I think I went to the gym 3 times and I was done with it. So it's pretty good to get that perspective in such a short amount of time. A lot of people talk about it. I think it was a little overrated, to be honest.
What was the key point?
Essentially that you decide what value you provide to the world. Or maybe not provide to the world, but every... I'm trying to find the best way to phrase it.
Sure.
Because what I was going to... Well, it's... What you want to do is what you're worth, essentially.
Okay.
And, I mean, what I was going to say is the fact that it is a good perspective. I think it spends an hour or two talking about his own time in Nazi concentration camps, and an hour or two talking about how this shaped his worldview and what it means to be a human being. And it was all good points of view, and I'm glad I got them, but it's not something that really changed my direction of thinking, and that's why I haven't thought about it in a while, I guess, and it might take me a while to recall that, but
I gotcha.
It was overall good, I would say.
Sure.
Next you read The Alchemist.
Yeah, this was when I was starting to really get into reading this past year, because I was pretty slow starting, because the Gulag's such a long book. The Alchemist is like a fictional story about a sheep herder who basically starts to figure out, capitalism in a small way, and starts figuring out what he wants to do with his life. And alchemy is the combination of elements for creating something else. So it's kind of a metaphor for that, but basically it's a really rich story about him starting off as a farmer, as a sheep herder, and then following this kind of path and following what this guy is telling him to do, to him being super rich and super well off. But there's a bunch of twists to it. It's really good. It's one of those, like, you're smiling while you're finishing it. Like, it's so satisfying. And I think it's like probably 100 pages. So.
Oh, really? It's that short?
It's a quick one.
Yeah, and that book is one of the most highly regarded.
Yeah.
books ever.
It truly is. I mean, it has so much wisdom. It's just it's really fun to read. So I'd recommend.
Nice. The next thing I read was an audiobook of Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark. And this was probably the most thought-provoking book I've ever read in my life. It was really, really good. It was essentially about where the future of artificial intelligence is going to take us. And he made it pretty long, too. I think the audiobook was like 12 or 14 hours. And one of the things I really liked about it was that he didn't provide any factual basis about this is going to happen because X, Y, and Z. Or he said, a number of things can happen. Like, people believe A, B, C, D, or E, and went into all of them. And you were really able to think about the implications of all of that and draw your own conclusions and be scared at times and be really hopeful at other times. And even the very beginning, even before chapter 1, he did a prologue of just how AI could take over literally everything from day-to-day life, and we are hardly even human anymore, and how we would still benefit from it. And it was sort of like a 45-minute long story about how this company creates it, and it just takes over everything. And it was really cool. And it was just really, really thought-provoking. I gave it to all my comp sci friends. It was like, you have to read this book. And especially now with AI has been such a buzzword the last 4 to 6 months. And I was glad I read this before all of that came out. So I would highly recommend that as well. You next read Life Force.
Yeah, Life Force, Tony Robbins, and another guy. Gosh,
I remember this.
This one was long. I mean, this was 26-hour audiobook, I think. Basically, all of the major breakthroughs in technology and medical devices / medical procedures that you could have done. Essentially, the tagline of the book is that aging is the worst disease known to man because it kills everyone. And Tony's basically making the point that in 20 years we're going to have so many breakthroughs that'll allow you to live 50 years past your lifespan that you want to prepare yourself and be healthy enough to make it in the next 20 years. Talks a lot about stem cells, talks a lot about peptides, which was really interesting. Kind of sucks because everything he said was related to a company that he had just invested in. But it also kind of sucked because everything was pretty expensive for a non-billionaire.
Yeah.
So he's having a full body MRI every year, which right now would be $3,500, which most people couldn't afford to do. But his thesis was $3,500 a year is a lot cheaper than, the $500,000 you're going to pay for, cancer treatments and things like that.
I'm sure it's just cool to hear about the science and make sure you're
absolutely
on top of it.
I mean, there's so many breakthroughs, so many genome things, and it really makes you optimistic about the future and the future of technology and healthcare. So it was really good. I mean, I would definitely recommend it, especially if you're someone who's concerned about that type of stuff. And wants to maybe do something to increase your likelihood of staying alive longer, or you want your parents to live longer, prevent Alzheimer's. It covers so much health-related. Basically just goes down the body of things you could do to improve your eyesight, brain, all of it. So I'd highly recommend. It's nothing earth-shattering because the last 2 chapters are a lot about mental health and stuff, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. Just about journaling and taking walks and all that. But I think the main takeaways are what you would expect, exercise, diet. Although diet was pretty interesting chapter, talking about not eating as much fish because of the chemical buildup of mercury. So really you should read it. There's a lot of stuff in there that you can take away from that.
Cool. So my next 2 were Liar's Poker, and then I audiobooked a book called Rework. Liar's Poker was really good, especially to read after Barbarians at the Gate, because it was also an account from the 80s, but from the other side. It was from the investment banking side. This was by Michael Lewis. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it. It was really good. He started his first 8-ish years at a huge investment banking firm, then went to London and then dropped out. And it was actually funny because he was like, I know not doing this is not the best idea financially for me to go be a writer. He's like, I could stay in finance, but now he's worth $150 million because he wrote that and Moneyball and The Big Short. They all went into movies. So it just shows he's a good writer, I guess, and knows about finance. He's actually the last 5 years he spent tracking Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX. So I'm sure he's going to write a book about that too.
Sweet.
But that was a really good account of investment banking in the 80s. Really, really interesting. Rework was absolutely awesome. It was a time where I was really interested in entrepreneurship and I didn't know what I wanted to create. It would probably be better if you did have an idea in mind. But they made it really short. They were like, we had this super, super long book and chopped 80% of it and made it super short with short rules. The chapters were like 4 to 15 minutes audiobook, and it was just a rule. And they went against, and it wasn't even like slightly changing the way to start a company. They changed like everything. And it wasn't people that are doing nothing. They had a software that sells for $100 million in revenue every year. And they were like, everybody says to go do this product market fit, these equations, these different graphs, and survey your customers. And they were like, fuck that. Like, your customer doesn't know what they want until you give it to them. Like, just give them something. And then if you want to change it, fine. But don't go surveying. Do you want, and that was just one of the things. They have so many different things about how you could change all these different approaches to making a business. And I thought it was really helpful and supportive in the fact that I'm not someone that wants to do everything by the book. So I liked that, and I would highly recommend.
Sweet.
Your next two were Green Lights and How Not to Be Wrong.
Yeah, Green Lights, this is probably my favorite book of all time.
I've heard really good things.
I think I've read it 4 times since. I think I read it then I read it again after that, and then I just read it again with the interactive journal. It's so good. I listened to it. It's Matthew McConaughey. He's, his voice is pretty angelic. It's so fucking good. It's like you take away little things. It brings back so many memories of your childhood. It's kind of goes along with this outlaw logic, kind of like breaking out of listening to the rules, like breaking out of being in a certain group, as Matthew McConaughey was, like in film school, and kind of broke away from being like the typical film school kid. He was just going to do his own thing, watch the blockbuster movies, be a kid from Texas in this industry that's super creative. And it gave me a lot of confidence, I think, in a creative aspect of just like, fuck what everybody else thinks. If that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it. And their judgments are bullshit. So, nice. Super empowering book. Just awesome. I would highly recommend the audiobook. Then How Not to Be Wrong is a mathematical guide to... the title kind of misleads because it's not really about arguing. It's more just about how to think about things in it with a mathematical or statistical mindset that makes you a lot less trapped inside of like, I don't really know what this number means, or I don't know what the odds of this happening are. It kind of breaks down that like level 1, level 2 thinking so that you can analyze the world around you and be like, okay, is a lottery ticket actually worth buying? And it just breaks down the math super easy. Brings in a bunch of case studies, talks about inverted.
Do you have to be into math to read something like this?
I wouldn't say so. It's really more conceptual. It talks about like inverted U-curves. Mm-hmm. A lot of, like one example is there's like a big brain trust, big group of people trying to figure out what to do during World War II or World War I forget. And they look at all these pictures of planes that just came back and where the bullet holes are, and all of the bullet holes are in the wings. And they're like, okay, where should we add, armor? Where should we add, extra plates so that they protect? Yeah. And like a bunch of people in the room are like, oh, obviously put them on the wings. That's where they're getting shot. Yeah. It's like, no, the ones that make it back here got shot in the wings. The ones that didn't make it got shot in the hull or where the engine is. True. We should add more to there.
True.
So it's basically just like flipping everything. Really good. I got super into it. Yeah, you have to read the book though. You can't. It's not an audiobook. There's pictures, diagrams, stuff like that. What do you got?
My next two were The Path and The Happiness Equation. Both I would lean towards not reading. I did that for you. The Path was alright. It was really good if you don't know much about it. It says The Path like towards financial freedom. It's not about that. It's about saving for retirement, and it's the same, like, invest in a Roth IRA, get a 401k, diversify your portfolio. Like, it's not that. I learned not much from it, I would say. But there were some cool graphs, and it wasn't terrible.
Maybe for somebody starting out in the
Absolutely.
financial world.
That's what I was going to say. If you don't know much about investing in finance or how to save, it's probably the perfect book for you. And I'm not saying I know that much, but it really is just the basics. And next, The Happiness Equation is just sort of a mindset book about wanting less, and then you'll be happier because of it, which I thought was pretty good as well, but it didn't really stand out to me in any special way, to be honest, so that's really all I have for those. Next, you read Meditations.
Yeah, Marcus Aurelius. This is a famous book, Stoicism. I don't particularly... I mean, this is like a big claim to make because it is one of the most famous books of all time. It wasn't exactly impactful. It's a translated book. I mean, there's a ton of wisdom. Every sentence could be analyzed for days, I think. But it overall didn't do much for me. I think there was a lack of words where I was like, okay, I can take this a lot of ways. It's Stoicism. If you're not into Stoicism, I wouldn't read it as the first book. If you're trying to get into it, I read a couple books about Stoicism, which made it a lot more applicable, I guess. But kind of like the Obstacle is the Way is a book I would recommend way before that, which is basically the same thing, just explained better.
Okay,
so.
Cool. Nice. Next, I read The Laws of Human Nature and The Power of One More. Those were both really good. The Laws of Human Nature was also by Robert Greene. I think it was written before the 48 Laws of Power, and it wasn't as good as the 48 Laws of Power, so I would definitely recommend reading that one first, or if you're only going to read one of them. The Laws of Human Nature is pretty similar, but it's not necessarily about power, I guess. It's just about living a better life. But it is also a little bit about power. And it was good, and some of those, when I talked about how the 48 Laws of Power is all these historical accounts and things,
Right.
This one has a lot of historical accounts, but also a lot of fictional accounts about examples. But it was still very, very good. The Power of One More was super good. I audiobooked this one, and it's as good as anything else. It's, if you're doing 100 push-ups, just do 101. And applying that to everything in your life. And again, it's sort of a mindset thing. And I actually used it when I started. I was starting this book at the same time I was starting a challenge over the summer to do 100 push-ups 100 days in a row, which isn't super, super hard fitness-wise, but holding yourself accountable to that is hard. And I was like, well, why don't I just do 101? And each day I just added one more. So I did 101, 102, 103. I held myself to it every single day, and over those 100 days, I did 15,000 push-ups instead of 10,000, which made a big difference. And that book literally did that for me, so that was good. You read I'd Like to Play Alone, Please, and The Compound Effect.
I'd Like to Play Alone, Please is Tom Segura. He's a comedian. Kind of speaks for itself. It's a funny book. It's really good. Tom Segura reads it. That was just for fun. He tells a lot of stories. The Compound Effect was one of my favorite books of the year. I think we talked about it on a previous video, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But it's not really about the compound effect, as we said before. It's really just about doing something every day to improve yourself for the future, and I really took that to heart. Like, if you're just reading 5 pages a day, that's 5 pages times 30 days more than you would read if you never did. So it talks a lot about little things and just like doing them so that you can better yourself, and that really spoke to me. Also, a lot about routines and kind of sculpting your day to work for you rather than it working you. So
yeah, that was actually the next book on my list as well, and I put that down as one of the best books I read for the year. It was really good. I remember you recommended it to me, and I just finished The Power of One More, and I knew this, the way you described it to me, was like, well, this book's pretty similar. Can it really be that good? And it was really, I don't even, you explained it pretty well. It was, I don't know, it was a great book. Next, I read The Name of the Wind, which it might be our only novel on this entire list. And I do like to read novels a lot. I didn't do it much last year, and I haven't much this year either. It's just hard to step away from nonfiction and self-help a lot of the time because they're really good. But this one was pretty good. It's just a story about, think Game of Thrones era, but it's not someone in power. It's someone that is a peasant, and of course they do special things because he's the main character. And I actually read the second one this year, or I finished it this year. And it's a trilogy. The third one's not written yet, and they've been amazing. I wish a little bit more had happened, but it's building up a lot for the third book, so sure. I guess we'll see. Your next book was The Hunger Games and then Blue Fishing.
Yeah, The Hunger Games, I don't feel like I have to cover. I didn't know you read that. Yeah, I went to army camp for 5 weeks. I couldn't really read a single thing while I was there. So I came back, and being in the woods, I was in the woods for, I think, 14 days straight. No shower, just hanging out. Reminded me a lot of The Hunger Games, and I read it for fun just to kind of get back into reading, which is something I highly recommend if you're just stuck in a rut. Just read something super gripping. Mm-hmm. That book's great.
I guess we do have another novel on there.
Yeah, that was, what was the next one?
Blue Fishing.
Blue Fishing was super good. Audiobooked it. It's an Australian guy talking about doing little things in business, kind of the blue fishing method, which basically involves never saying no to anything. So it's this guy who starts this company, and basically when anybody wants to do anything, they come to him and he makes it happen. So kind of like Make-A-Wish in a way, but for regular everyday people. They pay the price and he just goes and does it. I think he got somebody to the moon. He talks about creating Sirius XM radio. There's just some crazy stuff, and then he talks a lot about writing people notes and how genuine that can be, and how creating relationships and building relationships and maintaining them is so important, especially when you're trying to do something like blue fishing, which is, it takes a lot to get some of the things he wants done. So
never heard of that.
Really
Sounds
good stuff.
Next two I read were $100 Million Offers by Alex Hormozy and Build, an Unorthodox Guide to Making Things Worth Making. $100 Million Offers was really good. I audiobooked this. We've talked about Alex Hormozy before. It was pretty much all his YouTube videos put into a book. And it was better than that, though, because it was in a very chronological order. And he said it was about creating value. And pretty much, I think there's a subtitle about, it's $100 million offers, making offers so good that the customer can do nothing other than say yes, or something like that. And it, you would think it's clickbait, but it does provide a good blueprint on how to do that. Build, an Unorthodox Guide for Making Things Worth Making is by Tony Fadell, who made the first iPod and was on the team that made the first iPhone. He talks through his life, but it's more so about the why and how behind building and making things. And it was really, really good. I didn't put my red exclamation point next to that one, but I remember debating doing it so hard because I couldn't do it with all of them. But that one was really good. And especially because this year I read Steve Jobs, and they referenced Tony Fadell a lot, at that time in the book, and it just made me think back to the Build book, which was pretty interesting as well.
Sweet.
The last two books you read in 2022 were Animal Farm and Guerrilla Factory.
Yep. Animal Farm I read because after I read Gulag Archipelago, somebody recommended that to me. That's a pretty famous book. It's about animals, these pigs trying to form socialism within each other, and basically it all falls apart because socialism cannot work. It can only work in theory. So they overthrow the humans, and then they're trying to self-govern, and it's pretty entertaining. It's a funny book. It's, satirical, but also you can derive a lot of meaning from it. I think kind of went along with the theme of Gulag, like against socialism and combating some of those powers, and I think it came out for me just kind of with what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, and just kind of getting an understanding of that. 12 More Rules of Life, Jordan Peterson. The book speaks for itself. He puts into words what I think so often in a way that I would never be able to say it myself. And I think that's like the main beauty of his books, but he has little tips and little tricks as a psychologist who's seen so much in so many people's lives and helped people. It's so interesting and it's so good. The reading level is off the charts. I have to look up a page, just because he's that smart. But if you can make it through the first book, I think the second book is easier to read. I think the first is probably better, but they're both phenomenal.
Yeah, I read the first. I'm excited to read that one too.
Yeah. What else you got?
My last book was 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. And this one, I was so hesitant to read because everybody hears about it. Same thing with like Thinking Fast and Slow and a few other books that everybody hears about. And I'm like, well, can't I just watch a YouTube video? Like, I get it.
Right.
But I'm really, really glad I read this one. It was short, to the point, and just got the message across. And it was good, too. I mean, it just got my mind. It opened me up a little bit, and I was like, oh, you're not, like, going from 1 to 2. You're going from 0 to 1. And I was just like, that makes sense.
Right.
It's the same thing. I think I actually mentioned this last time I was on here. When you're creating a product so new, you have to make it look like something that already exists, or else people wouldn't even get it.
Sure.
When you create the first iPod, you had to have buttons on it. It couldn't be fully touchscreen.
Right.
Things like that. And I was really glad I read that. One thing I wanted to mention was in 6.5 hours, a book by Tim Urban drops. I think it's called What's Wrong with Us.
Okay.
As a civilization. And everybody that pre-read it, on Twitter at least, absolutely loves it. They said it's revolutionary. Lex Friedman said that on his interview, and I'm excited to read it, so I wanted to put that out there too. I don't know if you had any concluding thoughts as well.
Yeah, I was just going to rank mine. I think I did in my notes. Number 1 would have to be Green Lights. Number 2 is probably... do I have it here? Oh, is this a picture? Number 2, I've got to go with probably... I missed the Guerrilla Factory. Did I not put that on there?
Yeah, you started talking about 12 Rules for Life when...
The Guerrilla Factory is super good. It's about special forces.
I didn't know if there was a different name for it, and I was like, alright, I'll just let him go.
Yeah. No, yeah. I put Guerrilla Factory on here. 12 More Rules up there. The Alchemist. And then How Not to Be Wrong, I would probably throw up there as well. Super good. Audiobooks and regular books. I mean, just get it in where you can.
Yeah, I guess to go back through the ones I ranked super high: Relentless, 48 Laws of Power, Never Split the Difference, Barbarians at the Gate, Life 3.0, Rework, The Compound Effect, $100 Million Offers, and 0 to 1.
Sweet. Well, we hope you enjoyed this. Go check out some books. Improve yourself. So
enjoy it, guys.
What did you